Hey everybody, how's it going? No, it's definitely been a long time since I've posted anything for sure. Can't really apologize or anything, but if anyone has watched the earlier videos, just know it's a process and just trying to make more time. So I'm gonna just touch base. It's gonna be a little stream of consciousness right now. A couple things have just been coming up and things I want to share as far as the future is concerned. Some other businesses that I'm starting as well for people who might be interested. But large part of what is really in my awareness right now, I'm studying the myths of Mithra a lot right now. And what I think that this is going to start getting into is sharing maybe a little bit more personal history and a little bit more about my path and what I feel is going to help people as far as context for, uh, context. This humans have been alive for a long time, and enlightenment and awakening has been around for a long time. And one of the things that you can tell and resonate with is when you're going some kind of experience like this in our modern era, that it's just been happening for a long time. So you read all these ancient stories and just people going through similar things, and definitely the ups and downs of that. I won't get into it too much right now, but I will mention a particular author and researcher. His name is Jason Reza Georgiani. Jason spelled like normal, Reza Reza, Georgiani Jorgani. He's really easy to find on YouTube, and he's really prolific and it has a lot of stuff. And so if you wind up being interested with some of the things that I'm doing, I would definitely recommend researching him. And I'm going through all his material right now. Yeah, he's just a great researcher, and he's relatively politically active, but he's kind of chilled out a little bit. And that's also going to be sort of a side note as well. I'm going to start separating the channels a bit so that there's more, spirituality, awakening, shamanistic, kind of stuff. What's specifically political, what's specifically maybe emotional and relationship therapy and counseling, and also food and health. I'm starting a business right now. My landscaping business and gardening business is evolving into, we're going to be selling regenerative agricultural soil and fertilizers. So, and all these things cross pollinate. You need them all. It's a very, I'm sure you see, I mean, it's very custom, and I'm almost 50 now, but I can especially see when I was younger and I was really starting to wake up. That happened around 15. But I could also see just a lot of general pitfalls that a lot of people fall into. A lot of people, if vegetarianism and veganism works for you, then great. Then I'm trying to learn more about the alchemy of food. But I've just eaten meat. If you're interested, as far as, most of my nutritional information is in alignment with the Western Price Foundation, nursing traditions, Sally Fallon, just good food, but definitely involves animals for sure. I'm open. I'm trying not to be incredibly judgmental, but there's just, I've just seen a lot of harm, and I just experienced it as myself. I definitely wasn't a super conscious vegan at the time, some of my teenage years, soaking everything, and, just like I really wasn't super smart about it. But what I definitely noticed, and I'm sure you notice with a lot of people, a lot of times if you're living like that, you want to feel light all the time and really kind of like, access these kind of higher realms, but maybe you're not so grounded. If you are, great, like no judgment. I just have to talk about my own experience. And a lot of people maybe don't know that, the highest level of brain injuries due to nutrition are actually in the vegan and vegetarian population. So, but, give me more information if you want to weigh in on that, and I'll definitely study people from that ilk. But so far, animals are a part of my life, and that's where I find the most health. Definitely being kind and as humane as possible, and I am a farmer and work with regenerative agriculture. So one of the things that I do is I come out and I help people turn their properties into homesteading. So normally in homesteading, I would start really small, vegetable garden, getting into worms and bringing in chickens, you know. So yeah. So Mithra has just been coming in a lot. I know that mentioned in the past I'm going to be commenting on a lot of Christianity and a lot of where these stories come from. One of the terms that I really appreciated especially over the past year, is euhemerism, and a term that I learned from Acharya S., who's also just a wonderful woman who passed on. I mean, she was just so incredible and so prolific. If you're interested in any of these things and you don't know about Acharya, like I said, she's passed on. If you go to Stellar House Publishing on YouTube, you can definitely find her, and her books are pretty readily available. But this term, euhemerism, is basically when you take actual historical figures and you blend them into mythical figures. So the character of Jesus is just like a really great example of that. So it's really interesting that people who call themselves Christians, it's pretty much an illogical term, because it would, Christ, an anointed one, you know, Moshe, like a Messiah would technically need to be a real person. So there are certain personas, like I can't remember what the theory is called, but I'll get more versed in this, as far as the people who can show that who was it, Titus, you know, was one of the characters that Jesus was based on, the Roman emperor. Let's see, King Tut was another one, and the one that I think has the most credibility, as far as which also happened in the biblical period, even though a lot of what happened in the Bible actually took place in Egypt, which is where a lot of those stories are actually from, and they called people kings when they were actual pharaohs. And I talk about this in the videos that I've done with Ralph Ellis's material. And all that I'm really doing, and this is a really deep tenet of philosophy, is you're trying to find the contradictions in the research. So in logic, a contradiction is either a lie or an error. I've mentioned Jan Irvin, which is another good resource, but at the same time, not the best communicator. And something also like more in the psychological realm that I'll talk more about. And two, I can put myself in the same boat. I'm always learning more about communication, and I haven't always been the best communicator. So when I talk about someone, especially when I mention someone by name, it's always going to be a public figure. They're already out there. I'm sure they've already got all kinds of slings and arrows already, and you know, I appreciate it. And even though I'm just getting started and I only have like 70 subscribers right now, I still get it too. You know, like right now I'm drinking a beer, you know, and just like, you know, someone would be like, "This is so unprofessional for you to be drinking a beer on your channel." But hey, and you know, don't feel like I'm going to get into it too much right now, but we're definitely going to talk about plants, plant medicine, fungi medicine, you know, all those good things. So and why I feel like it's time, as far as getting into some of the more personal stories, is it just really helps. And I've mentioned this before, but it helps so much to hear what someone has gone through personally, especially if they've been through relatively traumatic things. And there's a spectrum of that. And I am definitely of the belief that no matter how much you've suffered or that you're suffering, someone has always had it worse. You know, there's no end to the depth and the suffering. And that kind of dovetails a little bit into what I'm going to be talking about a bit, as far as how this also weaves. There are different names and different traditions. In the shamanic tradition, I'm forgetting right now, was what they usually call the dark force weaving through things, as opposed to the light force, you know, the positive force. But that, as far as God is concerned, as far as life is concerned, as far as creation is concerned, there's no duality here. Nature is not polarized. That's not how nature works. Even that word nature, you know, comes from nut, you know, which is an Egyptian word, and basically means the field, the matrix, the mother. So another thing that I'll be getting into more is etherists. So the ether has been around for a long time, and there's going to be a lot of people, especially like certain scientists, who say it's all BS. But besides that, it can be proved metaphysically. And a lot of people think that metaphysics is some fluffy like word, but it's not. It's the meta, the underlying, what is before the physical? What is the underlying substance, essence before something manifests physically? And you can use that in any subject, especially as a part of it's a part of general logic and philosophy. That's what metaphysics actually. That's what it actually means. I remember when I was young and going to the metaphysical section, and yeah, there's a lot of fluffy. I'm just saying, basically, what I mean by that is just kind of ungrounded stuff, or simply it's just people's experiences. And sometimes you can have this incredible thing happen to you. You can't prove it. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about my path and some of the things I've seen and been through. And there's going to be plenty of things that I can't prove. And I don't care. But what we have to be comfortable with is that we can't prove it, and that's okay. So this is my life experience. This is what happened to me. You don't have to believe me. But I think another good example, and if you all haven't followed it in a while, or you're still following it, if you're still following it, I hope you jump off the Corey Good train, because this is a very good example of the possibility of going through a very profound experience, even in your own psyche, and then writing it as a story as if it really happened on Earth. And I've mentioned the Voyager material with the Ashiana. The books would have been under Ashiana Dean before she changed her name. And there are things in there. So Rudolf Steiner is another good example. Some people quote Rudolf Steiner as these things actually happen physically on Earth, but there's a lot of things that don't really add up. When you're talking about Ahriman as an actual person, when you talk about Lucifer as an actual person, it doesn't add up. It just doesn't. There's no historical accuracy. It just doesn't. But when you go back to where those characters started, you realize they're just a personification of an energy, just like Jesus. A lot of people don't know that Jesus is referred to as the morning star in the Bible, which is Lucifer. And Joseph Campbell's Power of Myth just really lays out a really good story of Lucifer and incarnation, what that actually means, because basically all of us are Lucifer. All of us are the light bringers. All of us came from a realm where there was light, incarnated into the darkness, and are trying to get back there, in order to bring as many people back home as we can with us. It's just a natural part of life. It's just how it's always been. And it's a way of honoring the ones who did it for us. And again, can I prove that? Can I prove that historically? It's the same thing like multiple incarnations. Statistically, mathematically, it's provable. And I can't remember the author. I'm going to make a note about that. One sec. She was a PhD who went around and were following basically all these children with these stories. And if anyone can post it in the comments, she's relatively famous in these kind of circles. I can't really remember her name. But so she went around and she found all these children who were talking about these stories, and maybe someone who was in a war, and they can just remember all these details. And once you start building up a certain amount of these stories and you go around the world statistically, which is also scientifically, like it is an aspect of science or a realm of science or field of science, it's provable, because it's impossible statistically to prove anything otherwise. If there are enough people who have access to memories, can even guide people back, or talk about like details of the plane they died in or whatever, and it's like a 6-year-old kid, just like it's, statistically impossible to prove anything otherwise. It's just, and the only way that you would be able to even get close, you'd have to be able to accept some sort of remote viewing or out of body, because or anything basically, psychic, as far as how they would access that information. But Steiner is good as far as a lot of these stories, and I find it helpful. But like I said, I have a few issues with Steiner, and I also have some theories that there was maybe some childhood trauma that was going on, because that is relatively common in a lot of people who are really wide open in this way psychically. You know, I had my own, and my Kundalini awakening happened when I was about 19, and when the enlightenment, when the rush of gnosis, and I'm going to talk about that because I really don't really like using that term. It's also very possible that Gnostic means know it all. I read that somewhere and I can't remember, and I really want to find it because I think there's a pretty good possibility, because you don't know something unless you can show it. So it doesn't matter if you're sitting on a mountaintop, out of your mind, like on mushrooms, and like God tells you like how it is, and like everything's just like, now I'm a Gnostic, or people who call themselves a Gnostic. As soon as you don't know anything, you're not a Gnostic anymore. And it's kind of stupid. So I don't, and most of the people, oh God, like, John Lash, just like so much arrogance, so much arrogance, and over time. And I'm one of my areas of study, as I had time to go back into, is a lot of the Eastern Orthodoxy, and like the history of like quote like Christianity and quote Gnostics. Again, two terms that really, interestingly enough, don't really mean a whole lot as far as the way that people actually practice these things, because technically, as soon as you stop knowing something, you're not a Gnostic anymore. And again, like I said before earlier, if you're calling yourself a Christian, unless you actually cite one of the actual Christs, because there were many, and that's one of the great things about Ashiana Dean's, or not Ashiana Dean's, but Acharya S's material, is you get to like see like all the Christs, because there's been all kinds of them, because it just means anointed one. And people were called anointed ones all the time. There are many King of Kings. It's not necessarily anything special. It's the same thing on, the Caesars were considered to be a god. There's just really no difference at all. So when we talk about maybe we have some memories beyond this life, I think a more accurate term is station of identity, because I think that all these things are going on simultaneously. I think that when we fall asleep, a lot of times we tap back into these memories. You'll notice in your dreams, you die in your dreams, and you die in your dreams, and now you're here. The only thing I think that is a little different when we make these larger leaps as far as into our incarnation, where we're going to spend a lot of time in, there's usually a little bit more of a review there. You're really, even just bare minimum. Let's say humans, let's just accept the standard timeline for humans, 200,000 years. So, so think about entities beyond this world that have known us for 200,000 years. All the forces that are looking out for us, and it's also a larger aspect of ourselves. What do I need to learn in this lifetime? And the reason that I'm talking about that aspect in particular is that I'm being guided to so many myths that talk about this transition when you have transcended, or at least transcended enough of your emotional baggage as far as a human incarnating on earth, and whatever you might have went through with your parents, whatever your immaturity, just basically getting your own shit together. And especially if you're in a relationship, especially if you're in a relationship, and you have children, which I do. And that the part of the myth of Mithra is the being that incarnates and then overcomes Kronos, overcomes the Father Time, Jehovah, El kind of figure, which is fate, the heavy-handedness of the Father, and transcends into being able to see the world from an enlightened, free perspective, and trying to become a part of that. Let's try to transition into the most peaceful and prosperous and abundant world we possibly can. But in order to move into that flow, we have to get beyond our own immaturity before we can enter that realm, and before we stop experiencing God as this punishing father, and we grow, and then we become more like the good son, the good daughter. And I'm going to be going through the Bible as well. And I don't exactly know what that process is going to be like, because the scholars that I follow and that I'm going to be, I don't know, it's going to be a long I mean, you know how long the Bible is. So I'm going to be reading and using the Greek Orthodox Bible. And as some things I'm just going to comment and talk about as far as just taking them at face value. But the reality is if you really want to know the Bible, you really got to know a lot. I mean, if you don't speak Greek, you know, you don't really know what it actually said. And even if you don't speak Aramaic, Hebrew, and Egyptian, for that matter, some of the best, you know, people who have the best grasp some of these things are the people who take the Hebrew and then translate it back into Egyptian, as far as where the Egyptian symbols and language that the Hebrew came out of. And you'll wind up seeing Ralph Ellis is really good about this, and that piece that I mentioned, a lot of people don't know, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, there are actually feminine references to God, but they're all these different, like, you know, God's like isn't the best word, because actually so much of that text comes from Sumeria in Egypt, and they're talking about these attributes of God. They're talking about attributes of nature. And so but what they did is that every place where you see, you know, Elohim, El Shaddai, Nut, which is the one of, you know, the feminine reference to God, they just put God across the board. They took them all out and just put God across the board, so it doesn't make any sense. And then you also find out whoever those beings were, that whether they were actual beings or just personas of attributes of life, that they weren't the big G, you know, the big God, you know, with the capital G, because it would just be basically like a being fighting with themselves. It doesn't make any sense, because in the Bible you'll see, you know, the L, it's like, you know, there are pieces in there where, you know, like the L of Persia is fighting like the L of this other place. And if it's literal, and of course there's all the ancient alien stuff, yeah, I mean, it does sound like these beings were fighting over territory. These beings were fighting for disciples, followers, and thus a lot of just the craziness and the slaughter, and which is also a deep side of a lot of people who call themselves Christian, because, you know, you want to put on this persona of this benevolent God and all these things, but then you're leaving out that this, quote, benevolent God is telling people to murder women and children. It just doesn't. And for some people, it's like, oh, yeah, obviously, you know, that doesn't make any sense, or it's very common if you grew up in like and I'm going to just keep putting the bunny ears on Christian, because it doesn't make any sense. It's an illogical word. If someone calls themselves a Christian, doesn't know about the was it? I think I said Titus before. That's a mistake. I mean Vespasian, as far as the Roman emperor, who people thought was the, quote, Christ or the Messiah. King Isus Manu of Edessa, which I think most of the, especially New Testament, is no, that's Old Testament too, is modeled after, or King, you know, Tutankhamun. So it just doesn't make any sense. So what I'm trying to, even though I'm not coining the term, what I'm trying to introduce into the lexicon anytime I'm talking about it, or I'm on Twitter or whatever, you're most likely, what you actually are is euhemerist, because you're blending myth with an actual historical figure. But no, they didn't even use the J sound. Like, if you're so devoted to Jesus, why are you calling him a name that he was never even called when he was alive? So people will talk about Yeshua, and then the reality is then, you know, if you're putting it in English, that you'd actually say Joshua. So if you're such a devout, and maybe I'll stop using like the bunny ears. If you're such a devout Christian, why aren't you calling them Joshua? You know, that'd be the English version, or, you know, or why aren't you calling them Yeshua, which would be the Aramaic, just like Jesus. It doesn't make any sense. And then plus, if you don't already know this, we're just going to get into it more. You know, the Son of God, the Son of Man. This is an old term. It's been around way before the character of Jesus, way before any of the actual people that the historical accounts were based on. So my path personally is a shamanic, or what people would call a shamanic path, and there's a healer from South America that I talked to, and I really appreciated when he really clarified. I mean, I've already heard what that name means, but I think this will make a lot of sense to you, and why, besides all the various jokes that occur in these circles as far as all these people calling themselves shaman means the one who knows. So this healer was telling me, and this is just beautiful, that a shaman would never call themselves a shaman. It's just the easiest way to kind of explain your path. You're dream interpreter, a medicine person, like all these things. But shaman means the one who knows. And so if you were in a village where they were using this term or something similar, and you say, I'm looking for the shaman, I'm looking for the one who knows, you'd like point down there, that's the one who knows. But when you get there, he or she is not going to call themselves that, because maybe they do, maybe they don't. And it's the same thing with gnosis. Just please, for the love of God, please stop calling yourself a Gnostic. It's just, but I also understand, because you're trying to find some way to define yourself. You're trying to define some way, especially even though it's not a complete binary, you know, you're like, I'm not Christian. So if I'm not Christian, I must be Gnostic. And again, neither terms are incredibly accurate. So maybe why not just be a person? And you don't necessarily need to belong to a church or any of these things, or have this title or whatever. So that's some of the gist of it, and I'm trying to tap in again as far as where some of these things are going to be going as far as subject matter and content is concerned. Maybe I'll comment just a little bit as far as just some of the feedback and comments on the channels, which is just great. And like I said, the only people I'm going to talk about, and I'm also open as far as just being interviewed on other people's shows, and this is the mentoring practice that I have as well, that I'm moving more into, to be helping more people with things like this, whether it relates to physical health, mental health, just basically, I will use quotes for this, life coach. I like the sound of mentoring, better. And I think there's like legal ramifications, if you're a coach and you use something like counseling, so I'm just trying to avoid that. And so the term that I use is mentoring. And then just beyond that, as far as farming and agriculture and these things, I literally have a consulting business. So I consult for these things, and it's all related. So they'll all be separated as far as the different channels and the different subjects, but it's all the same. It's all, and for me, that's what makes a well-rounded person, is all these subjects. And I think it's been a part of earthly life for thousands of years, and this is how it goes. So maybe that will be all for now. I know that I said I would comment a little bit on some of the things that people have been saying. And even like I said, people haven't been like incredibly hostile, but I know that's just part of it. And sometimes you just got to get it out, and I don't really care. I don't censor people. I mean, I don't think I'm going to censor if people are, making death threats or threatening violence or something, because that's just stupid. But yeah, get it out. I understand, and I've definitely been there myself. So just like, hey, you're full of shit, or whatever, or fine, just yeah, lay it on me. And it's important. And that being said, one of the pitfalls that a lot of people run into, Corey Good is just a great example of this, Lisa Renee, great example of this, is people who just can't take criticism and won't answer their critics. And even though this isn't the best or most accurate term, but it's the only one that I have, is like, this is cult personality. It's It's when you, rather than you face your critics and you answer those questions, you shrink back, you create this insular community around you of people who are just sycophants, and then you just basically sink deeper and deeper into your own darkness because you're not putting yourself out there. And if you know anything that's happening to Corey Good right now, just life is going to shit, because he's a liar. And rather than just putting his experience, or at least his let's say his process into a book or even movies or just like the comic book or whatever, like he would have been fine. And I don't really understand, and I don't know how much I'm going to get into that. I mean, I got a lot of my own feelings as far as why he did what he did, as far as lying about those things actually happening to him, and how those things don't add up. Oh, and just like, I know it seems like kind of random, but another good thing about Jason Reza Giorgiani that I mentioned is he also gets into UFOs and that's just that's a part of everything. I'll share more. That's definitely part of my path to, I've been in the field with Dr. Greer. The reason that I went to go spend time with Dr. Greer, I was in Brazil at a retreat center, and I had this feeling to go outside one night, and in the sky was this very bright. It was just like it was some sort of UAP makes a lot more sense. So I resonate with that definition rather than UFO, because it is an aerial phenomena. You don't necessarily know if it's a ship or whatever it is, but basically it was just like this large bright light, way brighter than any star in the sky, and it was basically this telepathic conversation of these yes or no questions, and just guided me to go spend time with Dr. Greer. And I don't know how much, I mean, there's certain things I'm in. I have these really small, like little kind of cameos in his documentaries, so you can kind of see me in there. But some of the people that I met and whatnot, I'd probably want to check in with them before I talked too much about those experiences. But they were beautiful, and Dr. Greer is a great man. I understand whatever critiques that people have of him. I think some of it is absolute bullshit, and I don't think it has anything to do with who he actually is. I think he's a great man, kind man, been through a lot, for sure. And but all of us here are here to learn things, so we're going to make mistakes, and for the most part, if you didn't have anything to learn, why would you even be here? I think that's kind of illogical in itself. So is there anything that I need to touch on as far as what people have been saying? Yeah, just keep it coming. Yeah, just keep it coming. And so I'm checking in, and there's going to be more videos in the future. I'll start a separate YouTube page for this regenerative agricultural soil and supply business that we're going to be started. So if you just want to learn about gardening, and like this is like the gardening of gardening, what these guys are doing is just incredible. So I'll just be sharing resources there, and we'll be getting into microscopy and just like all things in that kind of realm. And I'll just, again, be sharing some resources. So everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for all your comments. When you say something that you appreciate what I'm doing or what I'm sharing, you're welcome. I'm so thankful for the people who did this for me in the past. And now that we have these kind of avenues, YouTube, Rumble, all these things, it's just an incredible way to be able to share information. So thanks, and I will get back to you all with more videos as soon as I can. Peace.